The humid Memphis air hung heavy, thick with the scent of fried chicken and fading dreams. Jesse Flynn strummed a chord on his acoustic guitar, the sound thin and reedy in the narrow alleyway behind Beale Street. His fingers, calloused from years of playing, ached with a familiar protest, but he ignored it. The ache in his stomach was far more pressing. He was 24, with a mop of unruly brown hair that perpetually fell into his eyes, and a worn leather jacket that had seen better days and more than a few downpours. His guitar, a battered but beloved dreadnought, was his oldest friend, his confidant, and his only real hope. For the past 5 years, Memphis had been his home, a city that vibrated with music, but rarely seemed to resonate with his own. Jesse had arrived in Memphis with a head full of melodies and a heart full of hope, drawn by the legends. Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, B.B. King. Their echoes were everywhere, whispering from every juke joint and historic marker. He'd imagined himself adding to that chorus, finding his voice in the very birthplace of rock and roll and blues. Instead, he'd found himself busking for spare change, playing for indifferent tourists, and occasionally landing a gig at a dive bar where the clinking of glasses drowned out his most heartfelt lyrics. Today was worse than most. Crisp white eviction notice was taped to the inside of his tiny apartment door, a stark reminder of his overdue rent. His landlord, a stern woman named Mrs. Gavel, had been patient, but patience, like his savings, had finally run out. He had 2 days. 2 days to find enough money for rent, or he'd be sleeping on the streets, his guitar his only blanket. He closed his eyes, pressing his forehead against the cool wood of his guitar. "All right, Jesse," he muttered to himself, the words rough against his dry throat. "One more song, make it count." He began to play a slow, soulful rendition of "Can't Help Falling in Love." It was an Elvis classic, a song that always seemed to find its way to his fingers. When he was feeling low, he poured all his despair, all his longing into the notes. Chords swelled, simple yet profound, carrying a quiet ache that was uniquely his own. His voice, a rich baritone with a gravelly edge, filled the small space. Raw and honest, tourists occasionally ambled by their footsteps, echoing on the cobblestones. A few dropped coins into his open guitar case. Pennies, nickels, occasionally a quarter. He barely registered them. He wasn't playing for money right now. He was playing to keep his spirit alive, to remind himself that he was a musician, even if no one else cared. He sang the lyrics. "Wise men say, only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you." He thought of his dreams, foolish perhaps, but fiercely held. He was falling in love with a life he couldn't grasp, a future that seemed to always slip through his fingers. As the last note faded, the silence that followed felt heavy, suffocating. He opened his eyes, scanning the alley. It was empty. Just him, the humid air, and the distant murmur of Beale Street. A wave of exhaustion washed over him. He slumped against the brick wall, the guitar heavy in his lap. "This is it, isn't it?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "The end of the road." He thought of packing up, going back to his small hometown in Mississippi, admitting defeat. His parents, bless their hearts, would welcome him, but the thought of giving up on his music on this dream was a sharper pain than any eviction notice. He looked down at the handful of coins in his guitar case. Not even enough for a decent meal, let alone rent. He sighed, running a hand through his tangled hair. Maybe he wasn't meant to be a musician. Maybe he was just another wannabe destined to fade into the background. Noise of this city of legends. He picked up his guitar, intending to pack it away, but then a thought struck him, a tiny ember of defiance in the ash of his despair. He had come to Memphis for a reason. He had poured his heart and soul into every note, every lyric. He wasn't going to give up, not yet. Not when the very air he breathed here was saturated with the spirit of those who had chased their dreams against all odds. He wouldn't go home a failure. He just didn't know what else to do. His gaze drifted down the alley towards the bright lights of Beale Street, then back to the darker, quieter end where he sat. He wished for a sign, a miracle. anything to tell him he wasn't completely lost. He wished for just a moment, a chance encounter, a guiding light. He wished for a touch of the magic that had once made Memphis the center of the musical universe. As if in answer, a low rumble started in the distance, a deep, powerful sound that vibrated through the alley walls. It wasn't a tour bus or a delivery truck. This sound was different, smoother, more controlled. It grew louder, a purring engine approaching slowly. Jesse frowned, wondering what kind of car would be venturing into this quiet corner. He braced himself, expecting a group of rowdy club-goers to spill out, but the sound seemed to be drawing to a halt just around the corner. He leaned forward, curiosity briefly overcoming his despair. The rumble ceased, replaced by the soft click of an engine cooling. Then silence, again broken only by the distant hum of the city. He waited, uncertain. Had someone just parked, or was it something else? He felt a strange ripple of anticipation, a faint flutter in his chest that hadn't been there moments before. It was probably nothing, just a car, but still he found himself holding his breath. Jesse remained frozen, his guitar half-packed, his gaze fixed on the alley's entrance. The silence that followed the car's engine dying was profound, almost eerie. Then a slow, deliberate creak of a car door opening, followed by the soft crunch of footsteps on gravel. They were unhurried, measured, not the confident stride of a businessman, nor the hurried shuffle of a tourist. A figure emerged from the shadows at the alley's mouth, tall and broad-shouldered. The light from Beale Street cast him in silhouette at first, making it hard to discern details. He was wearing dark trousers and a casual shirt, but there was an unmistakable aura about him. Even in the dim light, Jesse's breath hitched. He felt a strange tremor, a sense of something important about to happen, even though his rational mind told him it was just another passerby. The man stopped, leaning against a brick wall just outside the radius of the single flickering street lamp. He didn't move, just stood there, seemingly observing the scene. Jesse instinctively lowered his head, wishing he could disappear. He hated being watched when he wasn't performing, especially when he felt so vulnerable. But something held him back from truly hiding. The man's presence wasn't intrusive. It was curious. Jesse slowly, reluctantly, picked up his guitar again. He hadn't intended to play another note, but the quiet presence of the man compelled him. He needed to prove, even if only to this stranger, that he wasn't just a down-on-his-luck kid, he was a musician. He started a blues riff, something raw and gritty, born of his current frustrations. His fingers moved with an unexpected agility, coaxing out mournful bends and sharp-cutting notes. The melody was his own, a story of struggle and resilience. His voice joined in low and resonant, weaving through the guitar's lament. The man didn't move. He just listened. Jesse risked a quick glance. The silhouette hadn't shifted, but he could feel the weight of his gaze focused intently on him. There was no judgment, no pity, just an absorbed attention. It was unnerving, yet oddly comforting. He felt, for the first time, in a long time, truly heard. He continued to play, pouring out his heart, his hopes, his fears. He sang about the dreams that felt like sand slipping through his fingers, about the fight to keep going when all signs pointed to quitting. His voice grew stronger, rising and falling with the emotion of the song. Closed his eyes, lost in the music, forgetting for a moment that he had an audience of one. When he finished the last note, hum in the air, trembling before fading into the humid night. Jesse opened his eyes, half expecting the man to have vanished, but he was still there. A little closer now, the street lamp casting more light on his face. Jesse's heart slammed against his ribs. It couldn't be. No, his mind rebelled. It was a trick of the light, a figment of his sleep-deprived imagination. But the man stepped fully into the light, and there was no denying it. The sculpted features, the dark, perfectly coiffed hair, the slightly weary but intensely blue eyes that seemed to hold a universe of experience. He was dressed simply, a dark shirt unbuttoned at the collar, a gold chain peeking out. Yet there was an unmistakable aura, a presence that filled the alley, making it feel both grand and intimately small. It was Elvis Presley. Jesse's jaw went slack. He felt his face flush hot. then drain of all color. He swallowed hard, but his throat felt suddenly dry as dust. He tried to speak, but no words came out. He could only stare wide-eyed at the legend standing before him. Elvis smiled. Then a small, gentle smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. It wasn't the flamboyant grin of the superstar, but a quiet, almost shy expression. "That was mighty fine, son," he said, his voice a smooth, deep drawl, just like in the records. "Mighty fine indeed." Jesse could only nod, mute. His mind raced, trying to comprehend this impossible reality. Elvis, here in this alley, listening to him. It felt like a dream, the kind you wake from with a jolt only to find disappointment. "You got a real feel for the blues," Elvis continued, his eyes crinkling further as he looked at Jesse's battered guitar. "That old box sings for you. Jakey, Mr. Presley." His voice sounded alien to his own ears, thin and reedy, nothing like the strong vocals he'd just delivered. Elvis chuckled softly. "Just Elvis, son. No need for formalities." He took another step closer, his hands casually tucked into his pockets. "You play often round here?" Yeah, sometimes," Jesse stammered, feeling his face burn. "Wherever they'll let me." Elvis nodded slowly, his gaze thoughtful. "Life on the road can be tough, the music business even tougher." Paused, his eyes studying Jesse's face, as if seeing beyond the surface. "You look like you've seen a few hard knocks." Jesse couldn't deny it. He just shrugged, feeling a sudden wave of humility. How could he complain about his struggles to a man who had experienced unimaginable highs and lows? "But you keep playing," Elvis observed, more a statement than a question. "That's what matters. You gotta keep that fire burning, no matter what." Jesse looked down at his guitar, then back up at Elvis. King of rock and roll was talking to him, offering words of encouragement. It was Namil. He still felt like he might wake up at any moment. "I try," Jesse managed, his voice a little stronger this time. It's all I know how to do." Elvis nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. "That's a good answer, son. That's the only answer that matters when the music gets in your blood." He shifted his weight, his gaze drifting over Jesse's worn clothes, his empty guitar case. A flicker of something, perhaps understanding, perhaps sympathy, crossed his features. Then his eyes fixed on Jesse's, and the playful spark returned. "You know," Elvis said, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more conspiratorial, "my daddy always told me to take care of business, and for me, that always meant taking care of the music, taking care of the people, and taking care of yourself, too." Jesse listened intently, trying to commit every word to memory. He felt a sudden inexplicable sense of calm wash over him, replacing the panic and despair. In the presence of this legend, for some reason, he felt safe, and for the first time in a long time, a tiny seed of hope began to sprout in his heart, pushing through the concrete of his cynicism. He just wished he knew what Elvis was getting at. Elvis's eyes, a startling blue, even in the dim light, held Jesse's gaze. There was a quiet intensity about him, a depth that went beyond his superstar persona. He wasn't just talking about music, he was talking about life, about perseverance. "Taking care of business," Elvis repeated, his voice a thoughtful murmur. "It's more than just a catchy phrase, son. It's a way of life. You gotta be sharp, you gotta be ready, and you gotta believe in what you're doing." He suddenly understood the profound meaning behind the simple phrase. It wasn't about luck or waiting for things to happen. It was about being proactive, about having the grit to push forward. Elvis reached a hand to his neck and Dangan, brushing a cane. Jutting beneath his shirt collar, Jesse watched, mesmerized. He knew what was coming next, almost instinctively coming. It was a lightning bolt striking through the letters TCB. It was distinctive, iconic, a symbol known to millions of fans around the world as Elvis's personal motto and the name of his band. "I've had this for a while," Elvis said, his voice soft, almost reverent. He held it up, letting it catch the faint light, the gold gleaming. "It's been with me through thick and thin, through the good times and the not-so-good ones. Jesse couldn't tear his eyes away from it. It was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a tangible piece of Elvis's legacy, a symbol of his drive and ambition. The words were barely a whisper. This was too much a gift like this from Elvis himself. It felt sacrilegious to even consider it. Elvis chuckled a low, rumbling sound that filled the alley. "Nonsense, son. I'm offering it to you. And I don't offer just anyone my TCB. You got a spirit in you, Jesse. I heard it in your music. That's what TCB is about. Keeping that spirit alive." With a gentle tug, Elvis unclasped the chain from his neck. He stepped closer to Jesse, the pendant gleaming in his palm. Jesse could see the faint scratches on the gold, the signs of a life lived, a journey undertaken. It was real. This was truly happening. Elvis pressed the comb. "Here," he said, his voice soft but firm. "This is for you." Jesse stared at the necklace in his hand. The weight of it felt immense, far heavier than its actual size. It was warm from Elvis's skin, a living connection to the man standing before him. He looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "But why me?" Jesse asked, his voice trembling. "I'm just nobody." Elvis smiled, a knowing, almost paternal expression. "There's no such thing as nobody when you got music in your soul, son. I saw something in you tonight, a hunger, a fight, and a whole lot of talent." He paused, his gaze lingering on the necklace in Jesse's hand. "This ain't just a charm, Jesse. It's a reminder to take care of business, to always put in the work, to believe in yourself, even when no one else does. And when you do that, well, the good things, they tend to follow. You got a gift, Jesse. Don't you ever forget that. Now, go on, put it on." Jesse's fingers fumbled as he tried to grasp the delicate clasp of the chain. His hands were shaking too much. He looked up helplessly at Elvis. Elvis chuckled again, his smile widening. "Here, let me." Took the chain from Jesse, his large, gentle hands surprisingly nimble. Jesse turned, presenting the back of his neck. He felt the light brush of Elvis's fingers against his skin as the necklace was placed around his neck. Cool nettle of the pendant settled against his chest, right over his heart, a sudden warmth spreading through him. "There," Elvis said, stepping back. "Looks good on you, son, like it was always meant to be there." Jesse reached up, touching the pendant. It felt like a part of him already. He looked at Elvis, overwhelmed with gratitude. "Mr. Presley, Elvis, I don't know what to say. Thank you. Thank you so much." Elvis simply nodded, his eyes kind. He looked towards the alley entrance, a subtle shift in his demeanor, as if his time was drawing to a close. "Just remember what it stands for. Jesse, TCB. Taking care of business in a flash." He winked. "Now I gotta be moving on, but you keep that music alive." And with that, Elvis turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows as quietly as he had arrived. Jesse stood there, rooted to the spot, the TCB necklace warm against his skin, his mind reeling. He watched the black Cadillac from earlier slowly pull away from the curve at the end of the alley, its taillights glowing red as it vanished into the Memphis night. He was alone again, but the alley no longer felt heavy with despair. It felt charged with possibility, infused with an almost magical energy. Touched the necklace again, reassuring himself. It was real. The small gold lightning bolt was a beacon against the darkness, a promise whispered by a legend. He had been given more than a piece of jewelry. He had been given a blessing, a purpose, a challenge. And for the first time in a very long time, Jesse Flynn felt a surge of hope, so strong it made his eyes burn. He wasn't just a struggling musician anymore. He was the one Elvis Presley had chosen, the one he had given his TCB to, and that he knew changed everything. Jesse stood in the alley for a long time, long after the Cadillac's hum had faded completely. Touched the TCB necklace, the gold cool against his skin, then warm as his fingers lingered. Was it real? Had he truly just met Elvis Presley and been given this? He pinched himself hard. The sharp pain was undeniable. It wasn't a dream. He looked down at his guitar case. The handful of coins still lay there, mocking his financial desperation. But somehow the eviction notice, the hunger, the overwhelming sense of failure had receded. They were still there, looming, but now there was a shimmering veil of disbelief and exhilaration over everything. He thought back to Elvis's words, taking care of business in a flash, and this ain't just a charm, Jesse. It's a reminder to take care of business, to always put in the work. To wasn't magic. Then, not exactly. There was a catalyst. He carefully packed his guitar, his movements slow and deliberate as if he were handling something precious. The necklace felt heavier now, not in weight but in significance. It was a responsibility, a challenge. As he walked out of the alley, the usual noise and bustle of Beale Street felt different. Sharper, more vibrant. He saw the neon signs, heard the blues spilling from doorways, felt the rhythmic thump of a bass drum from a nearby club. But now it wasn't just noise. It was a symphony, a chorus of dreams and struggles and triumphs. He made his way back to his tiny apartment, the walk feeling lighter than usual. His keys, usually a heavy weight in his pocket, felt almost buoyant. Climbed the creaky stairs, the eviction notice still taped to his door. He looked at it, and for the first time a flicker of defiance sparked within him. He wasn't beaten yet. He entered his apartment, a single room cluttered with sheet music, old records, and clothes. Took off his worn jacket, then looked in the cracked mirror on the wall. TCB necklace gleamed against his chest, a stark contrast to his faded t-shirt. He smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that reached his eyes. He sat on the edge of his bed, the guitar resting against his leg. He didn't feel like sleeping. He felt a surge of creative energy, a need to capture this moment, this feeling. He picked up his guitar. The old wood felt different in his hands now, imbued with a new purpose. A melody began to form in his mind, simple at first, then growing more complex. It was a song about hope, about finding light in the darkest of places, about a chance encounter that changes everything. He hummed, then strummed, and soon words began to tumble out raw and honest. He played for hours, writing and refining the music, flowing effortlessly. He didn't notice the time passing or the growing hunger pains. He was lost in the creative process, a feeling he hadn't experienced with such intensity in years. The necklace was a constant cool presence against his skin, a silent muse. Just as the first hint of dawn began to paint the sky outside his window, his old battered flip phone buzzed on the nightstand. Jesse jumped, startled, the melody still echoing in his head. He usually ignored calls from unknown numbers, especially at this hour. But something prompted him to answer. "Hello?" he croaked, his voice hoarse from singing. "Jesse Flynn." A gruff voice on the other end. "This is Frank Lombardi from the Blue Note." "Yeah, you played here a few times, right?" Jesse frowned. The Blue Note was a decent club bigger than the dive bars he usually frequented. He'd auditioned there once months ago and been politely rejected. "Yes, Mr. Lombardi, that's me. Listen, my regular guy for the afternoon slot just called in, sick real sudden. Got no one else you busy tonight?" Jesse's heart gave a jolt. The afternoon slot at the Blue Note was a prime gig, early enough to avoid a late-night crowd, but visible enough to attract industry people. "No, Mr. Lombardi, I'm wide open." "All right. Good. Be here by 4 p.m. Pays $100 for 3 hours. Think you can handle it?" $100. That was more than he made in a week. Busking. It wouldn't cover all the rent. But it was, absolutely. "I'll be there." "Good. Don't be late." The line clicked dead. Jesse stared at his phone, a wide grin spreading across his face. A gig, a real gig, the very same club that had turned him down, and it came just hours after meeting Elvis. Coincidence, maybe. Clutched the TCB necklace, its presence a warm reassurance against his chest. He felt a burst of energy. Pushing aside his fatigue, he had to be ready. He had to practice. He had to make this gig count. "Taking care of business," he whispered, a smile playing on his lips. He started playing the new song he'd written, his voice filled with renewed passion. This was just the beginning. He could feel it. The tide was turning. The Blue Note was exactly as Jesse remembered it, dimly lit, a haze of stale cigarette smoke, despite the no-smoking signs, and a small stage bathed in a solitary spotlight. The afternoon crowd was sparse, mostly older regulars, nursing cheap beers, but Jesse didn't care. He was on a stage, playing his music, and that was enough. He started his set with a few familiar blues covers, easing into the space, getting a feel for the acoustics. Then, with the TCB necklace a comforting weight beneath his shirt, he launched into the new song he'd written, the one inspired by his encounter with Elvis. He called it Alley Echoes. His voice, usually a bit rough from the strain of busking, was clearer, richer. He sang with an unshakable conviction, pouring out the raw hope that had surged through him. He looked out at the few faces in the crowd, and for the first time, he wasn't just playing for them. He was playing to them, sharing a piece of his soul. He noticed Frank Lombardi, the club owner, watching from the bar, a rare, almost approving look on his gruff face. A few patrons stopped their conversations, turning to listen, tapping their feet. Jesse even saw a young couple lean closer, captivated. It was a small victory, but to Jesse it felt like the world. When he finished Alley Echoes, a smattering of applause broke the quiet. It wasn't a standing ovation, but it was genuine. And for Jesse, it was everything. He felt a surge of confidence. He played the rest of his set with newfound energy, his guitar singing, his voice strong and true. Frank Lombardi, true to his word, handed him a crisp $100 bill. At the end of the night, "You were good, kid," he grunted. A rare compliment. "Really good. Next Friday? Same time." Jesse's heart soared. Frank started booking him for the regular afternoon slot, then occasionally for an early evening set when a bigger act canceled. Word began to spread through the local music scene. "You gotta hear Jesse Flynn at the Blue Note," people would say. "He's got this raw, soulful sound, a mix of blues and rock, and his own songs. They'll hit you right in the gut." Jesse still lived in his cramped apartment, but now he could afford the rent, and even a decent meal or two. He was still far from famous, but he was no longer struggling to survive. He was gaining momentum, building a small but loyal following. The TCB necklace became his constant companion. He wore it every day, every night, on stage and off. It wasn't a lucky charm, he reminded himself. It was a reminder to work hard, to be prepared. And every time he felt a doubt creep in, or faced a challenging moment, he'd touch the cool metal. I'm remembering Elvis's words. The challenges were still there. The music industry was a relentless cheese. There were times when his voice was hoarse, his fingers sore, and exhaustion threatened to swallow him whole. Other musicians, sometimes jealous, would try to put him down. "Just a flash in the pan," they'd say. "Heard he got some old relic from someone. Thinks it's magic." But Jesse didn't let it deter him. He just kept playing. He kept writing. His new songs were deeper, more complex, infused with the trials and triumphs of his recent journey. He wrote about the long road, about the power of belief, about the echoes of legends that inspired him. One night, after a particularly grueling set, a well-dressed woman approached him at the bar. Her name was Brenda Maxwell, and she introduced herself as a scout for a small independent record label based in Nashville, Rising Tides Records. Jesse's heart did a flip-flop. Nashville. A record label, this was it. This was the dream. "I've been hearing about you," Brenda said, her voice smooth and professional. "Heard you play a few times. Now you got something, Jesse. A unique voice. A real storyteller. I like your original stuff, especially that song, Alley Echoes." "I think it was." Jesse nodded, his throat suddenly dry. "Yes, ma'am, that's one of them. I think you could do well," she continued, her eyes sharp and assessing. "We're a small label, but we believe in artists with real talent, not just manufactured pop. We could help you get your music out there beyond Memphis." She handed him her business card, thick and embossed. "Think about it. Give me a call next week. We could talk about a demo, maybe even a contract." Jesse stared at the card in his hand, his mind reeling. A record deal. The words hung in the air, heavy with possibility. This was the kind of opportunity he had only dared to dream of, the kind that seemed impossible for a struggling musician from a Memphis alley. He looked down at the TCB necklace, gleaming beneath his shirt. It wasn't magic, he knew that, but it had been a catalyst, a beacon, a symbol that had pushed him to believe in himself, to keep taking care of business. And now the road was stretching out before him, a real path towards the future he had always yearned for. The road less traveled was opening up, and he was ready to walk it. Jesse called Brenda Maxwell the very next day. His voice, usually confident when singing, trembled slightly as he explained his interest. Brenda was efficient, professional, and clearly saw something in him. Within 2 weeks, he was on a bus to Nashville. His guitar case carefully stowed, the TCB necklace a comforting weight against his chest. Nashville was a whirlwind, bright lights, towering buildings, and music spilling from every corner. It was a different beast from Memphis, more polished, more industry-driven. He felt a pang of nervousness, a familiar knot of self-doubt. Could he really make it here? Was his raw Memphis sound enough for the polished world of Nashville? He touched the TCB necklace, feeling the familiar gold and instantly remembering Elvis's steady gaze. "Take care of business, son." Brenda met him at the Rising Tides Records office, a cozy brick-faced building that felt more like a home than a corporate space. She introduced him to Robert Hayes, the label's founder, a grizzled veteran with kind eyes and an infectious passion for music. "Heard your demo, Jesse," Robert said, shaking his hand firmly. "Brenda's got a good ear. You got something special. Real, honest-to-goodness talent." They talked for hours. Jesse played a few of his original songs live, including Alley Echoes, which Brenda had specifically asked for. He poured his heart into each note, each lyric, thinking of the journey that had brought him to this very room. He felt the necklace warm against his skin, fueling his performance. Robert and Brenda listened intently, nodding, occasionally exchanging glances. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then Robert clapped his hands together. "All right, Jesse, let's talk numbers." The ensuing conversation was a blur of legal terms, percentages, and royalties. It was overwhelming, intimidating, but also exhilarating. They were offering him a record deal. A real honest-to-goodness. It wasn't a huge advance, but it was enough to cover a decent apartment, studio time, and a promise to release his first album within the year. Jesse excused himself for a moment, needing a breath of fresh air. He stepped outside the office, the Nashville skyline stretching before him. He pulled the TCB necklace out from under his shirt, holding it in his palm. It shimmered in the afternoon sun. He wasn't naive. He knew a record deal wasn't a guarantee of success. The music industry was littered with one-hit wonders and forgotten artists, but this was his chance, his shot. He thought of Elvis again. Would he have signed this deal? Would he have embraced the commercial side of music while staying true to his roots? Jesse knew the answer. Elvis had done it. He had taken his raw talent and made it palatable for the masses, all while holding onto the core of what made him extraordinary. Jesse took a deep breath, the fresh Nashville air filling his lungs. "Taking care of business," he whispered to himself, a mantra that now felt ingrained in his very being. It meant not just signing the papers, but making the most of every opportunity, working harder than ever, and never forgetting where he came from or why he started. He walked back inside, a renewed sense of purpose radiating from him. He shook hands with Robert and Brenda, a determined glint in his eye. "I'm in," he said, his voice firm and clear. "Let's make some music." The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. The recording studio was a magical place filled with banks of mixing boards, microphones, and soundproofed rooms. Jesse worked with a team of experienced producers and session musicians, learning the intricacies of recording, the subtle art of laying down tracks, and the patience required to perfect a single note. He poured his heart into every song. Alley Echoes was chosen as the lead single, a testament to the journey that had brought him here. He recorded new versions of his old blues numbers, giving them a fresh polish without losing their raw edge. And he wrote even more inspired by his new experiences, the challenges of the studio, and the ever-present motivation of the TCB necklace. Sometimes, late at night, when the studio was quiet and only the hum of the equipment filled the air, he would touch the necklace, thinking of that brief, magical encounter in a Memphis alley. He wondered what Elvis would think of his music now, transformed from alley busking to studio recordings. He hoped he would be proud. There were moments of doubt, of course. Moments when a note wouldn't come out right or a lyric felt forced. Moments when the pressure of the impending album release weighed heavily on him. But then he'd remember Elvis's words, "Believe in yourself, even when no one else does." And he'd push through. The album began to take shape. A collection of songs that told his story, from the desperation of the alley to the glimmer of hope to the reality of pursuing his dreams. It was honest, heartfelt, and uniquely Jesse Flynn. As the release date approached, a quiet excitement began to build. Brenda and Robert were optimistic. Radio stations were beginning to show interest. Promoters were discussing potential tours. Jesse, the struggling musician who once worried about making rent, was about to become Jesse Flynn recording artist. The TCB necklace, once a symbol of a dream, was now a symbol of a dream in progress, a testament to the unwavering belief and hard work that went into taking care of business. He was ready for the next chapter. The day Jesse's debut album, aptly titled Alley Echoes, was released, he felt a mix of exhilaration and terror. It was real. His music, his stories were out there for the whole world to hear. He spent the morning at a small Nashville coffee shop, nursing a lukewarm cup of joe, nervously checking his phone. Brenda called first, her voice buzzing with excitement. "Jesse, Alley Echoes is getting some great early reviews. The critics are loving the raw honesty, and the radio stations are starting to pick up the single. This is it, kid." Jesse felt a wave of relief, then a surge of pride. Clenched his fist, touching the TCB necklace beneath his shirt. It was happening. Within weeks, Alley Echoes began to climb the independent charts. The lead single, the very song he'd written in the wake of his encounter with Elvis, became a sleeper. Its haunting melody and poignant lyrics resonated with listeners, a beacon of hope in a world hungry for authenticity. The local gigs at the Blue Note quickly turned into club dates across the South, then national tours. Jesse found himself on buses and hotel rooms, playing for crowds that grew larger with each passing week. He went from busking in alleys to performing in sold-out theaters, the roar of the crowd, a symphony he never tired of. He was no longer just Jesse Flynn, the struggling musician. He was Jesse Flynn, the rising star. Interviews, photo shoots, television appearances, his life had become a whirlwind of lights, cameras, and action. It was exhausting, exhilarating, and at times overwhelming. His old guitar, the one that had witnessed his lowest points, was still with him, but now it shared the stage with a collection of new, high-end instruments. He ensured it was always displayed, prominently badged, a quiet tribute to his beginnings. He never forgot the necklace. It was his anchor, his reminder. Before every show, he'd touch the TCB pendant, remembering Elvis's words. "Believe in yourself, even when no one else does." It wasn't about luck. He truly understood that now. It was about relentless dedication, about showing up, about taking care of the business of his music, his art, and his integrity. One evening, after a particularly energetic show in New Orleans, he was backstage signing autographs. A young fan, no older than 15, handed him an album cover to sign. "Mr. Flynn," the boy said, his eyes wide with awe, "you're my hero. Your music, it's like you understand everything I'm going through." Jesse smiled, genuinely touched. He recognized that look in the boy's eyes, the same fierce devotion he'd once had for Elvis. "Keep chasing your dreams, kid," Jesse said, his voice gentle. "Never give up." He signed the album. "To a future legend, keep taking care of business, Jesse Flynn." He felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He wasn't just making music, He was inspiring others just as Elvis had inspired him. His songs, particularly Alley Echoes, became anthems for perseverance. Fans would approach him, tears in their eyes, telling him how his music had helped them through tough times. He had found his voice, not just as a singer, but as a messenger. Yet, amidst the success, there were moments of quiet introspection. He missed the simplicity of playing in the alley, the direct connection to his music, without the pressures of touring schedules, album sales, and public expectations. There were times when the road felt lonely despite the crowds. The spotlight was bright, but it could also feel isolating. He remembered a line from a song he'd heard once about how the higher you climb, the harder the fall. He didn't want to fall. He wanted to stay true to himself, to the music that had saved him. One night, alone in his hotel room in Los Angeles, he stared at his reflection in the mirror. The TCB necklace gleamed against his skin. He looked at his eyes, tired but bright. He remembered the desperate young man in the Memphis alley, clinging to a thread of hope. He had come so far, pulled out his guitar, a new custom-made one, but still with the same spirit. He played the opening chords of Alley Echoes, a familiar comfort. As he strummed, he felt a wave of profound gratitude, not just for the success, but for the journey, for the struggles that had made him stronger, for the hope that had propelled him forward, and most of all, for that one fateful, impossible encounter. He realized then that taking care of business wasn't just about hustling or making money. It was about taking care of your soul, nurturing your gift, and honoring the trust placed in you. Elvis hadn't just given him a necklace. He'd given him a profound lesson in life, a philosophy that now guided his every step. He looked at his guitar. There were more songs inside him. He knew it. More stories to tell, more lessons to learn. The road was long and full of twists and turns, but he was ready. He was taking care of business, and with the spirit of the king beside him, he knew he could face anything. Success, Jesse quickly learned, was a double-edged sword. The thrill of packed venues and screaming fans was undeniable. Hearing his songs on the radio, seeing his face on magazine covers, it was all a dream come true. But it came with its own set of challenges, a different kind of pressure than the one he'd known in Memphis. The demands were relentless. Endless touring media, appearances, interviews that picked apart his every word. There were critics who dissected his music, comparing him to legends, sometimes favorably, sometimes harshly. There were the hangers-on, the people who suddenly appeared claiming to be old friends, seeking a piece of his newfound fame. His quiet life had vanished, replaced by a constant hum of activity. Sometimes, in the dead of night, alone in a luxurious hotel room miles from home, a deep loneliness would settle over him. He missed the simplicity, the genuine connections, the days when music was purely for passion, not profit. He felt the weight of expectations. His record label Rising Tides wanted a follow-up album, and they wanted it fast. The pressure to top his debut to prove he wasn't a one-hit wonder was immense. Creativity, once a spontaneous surge, sometimes felt like a forced obligation. During these moments of doubt, he would instinctively reach for the TCB necklace. It was always there, a solid, comforting presence against his chest. He'd pull it out, letting the gold lightning bolt rest in his palm, and remember Elvis's words, "Taking care of business, believe in yourself, even when no one else does." He began to understand that Elvis too must have faced immense pressure. The scrutiny, the adulation, the constant demands. How did the king maintain his authenticity? Amidst all that, Jesse realized it wasn't about shutting out the world, but about finding his center, holding on to the core of who he was. Taking care of business wasn't just about making money or climbing charts. It was about protecting his creative spirit, staying grounded, and remembering the reason he started playing music. In the first place, he insisted on time off the road to write, to reconnect with his roots. He made sure to visit Memphis whenever he could, walking the familiar streets, sometimes even venturing into the alley, where it all began, just to remind himself he used his platform for good. Remembering his own struggles, he started to get involved with charities that supported aspiring musicians, donating instruments to schools, and offering scholarships for music lessons. He often gave impromptu performances at small, struggling clubs, giving back to the kind of venues that had given him his start. One particular experience resonated deeply. He was performing at a benefit concert in Nashville for music education. After his set, a young man barely out of high school approached him. He had a guitar case clutched nervously in his hand, much like Jesse's old one. "Mr. Flynn," the young man stammered, his eyes wide. "I'm a huge fan. Your song, Alley Echoes. It's what keeps me going. I'm trying to make it, but it's so hard." Jesse saw his past self in the young man's anxious face. He remembered the hunger, the desperation, the flicker of hope. He looked at the TCB necklace, then back at the boy. "What's your name, son?" Jesse asked kindly. "Liam McConnell." "Liam," Jesse said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "It is hard. No one ever said it would be easy. But you got to keep that fire burning. You got to keep taking care of business." He then shared a story, one he hadn't spoken about publicly before. He told Liam about that humid Memphis night, about the worn guitar, the eviction notice, and the impossible encounter with a legend. He spoke about the TCB necklace not as a magical charm, but as a symbol of hard work and self-belief. Liam listened, captivated, his jaw slowly dropping as Jesse recounted the tale. When Jesse finished, Liam was speechless. "King himself," Liam finally whispered reverently, touching the necklace Jesse now wore outside his shirt. "King himself," Jesse confirmed, a soft smile on his face. "And he reminded me that it's all about what you do with the gift you've been given. The real magic isn't in the object, Liam. It's in the belief, the grit, the dedication. That's TCB, so go on, take care of your business." He wasn't just a fan anymore, he was a fellow traveler on the difficult, exhilarating road of music. Jesse saw the spark, the understanding in his eyes. He had passed on the message, the philosophy of TCB, just as Elvis had passed it to him. As Jesse continued his tour, the weight of success didn't disappear. But it felt different. It wasn't a burden anymore. It was a responsibility to his music, to his fans, and to the legacy of the man who had shown him the way. He was no longer just chasing his dream. He was living it and helping others chase theirs. Years passed. Jesse Flynn had firmly established himself as a prominent voice in modern rock and roll, blending classic Southern rock with his soulful blues roots. His albums consistently topped the charts. His tours sold out arenas, and his music was celebrated for its authenticity and raw emotional power. He was an artist, not just a performer, and critics hailed him as a worthy successor to the legends he admired. But despite the accolades and the global fame, Jesse never forgot where he came from. Memphis remained his spiritual home, and he returned often, not just for concerts, but for quiet reflection. One warm autumn evening, Jesse found himself back in Memphis, walking the familiar streets near Beale. He was in town for a massive stadium concert, a homecoming show that had sold out in minutes. But before the chaos of sound checks and press conferences, he needed this quiet moment. He deliberately sought out the alley, the very spot where his life had irrevocably changed. It looked the same, the worn brick, the flickering street lamp, the lingering scent of Beale Street. No one was there this time. No aspiring musician busking for spare change. The silence felt both peaceful and poignant. Jesse leaned against the same brick wall where he'd slumped in despair all those years ago. He pulled out the TCB necklace from beneath his shirt, letting the gold pendant rest in his palm. It was smooth from years of constant wear, its edges softened, but the lightning bolt and letters were still sharp and clear. This wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a relic, a talisman, a tangible link to a moment that felt both yesterday and a lifetime ago. He closed his eyes, remembering Elvis's presence, the quiet strength in his voice, the warmth of his hand as he placed the necklace around Jesse's neck. He remembered the feeling of disbelief, then the gradual dawning of hope, the slow, steady burn of motivation. He thought about Liam, the young musician he'd met in Nashville, and how he had tried to pass on the same spirit of TCB. He had learned that the true gift wasn't the material object, but the intangible message: believe in yourself, work hard, and never give up. And crucially, to take care of others, to pass on that hope. As he stood there, lost in thought, a faint melody drifted into the alley from the street. It was a guitar, hesitant at first, then growing more confident. It was a familiar Elvis tune, a slower, more mournful rendition of Heartbreak Hotel. The voice that followed was young, raw, and filled with a familiar ache of longing and despair. Jesse opened his eyes. He walked slowly, quietly towards the source of the music. Just around the corner, near the entrance to the alley, a young woman sat on an overturned crate, her guitar case open on the ground, holding only a few scattered coins. She had tangled red hair, bright, hopeful eyes, and a worn denim jacket. She looked exactly as he had felt all those years ago. She was engrossed in her music, eyes closed, pouring her soul into the song. Jesse recognized the despair in her voice, but also the undeniable talent. She had that spark, that raw emotion he'd felt within himself. He stood for a long moment, just listening. He thought of how Elvis had done the same for him, how he had recognized something in a struggling kid in an alley. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Jesse smiled a kind, reassuring smile. "That was mighty fine," he said, his voice soft, echoing the words Elvis had spoken to him. Mighty fine, indeed. The young woman, whose name was Sarah, stammered a thank you, clearly overwhelmed. Jesse pulled the TCB necklace from his neck. It felt heavy in his hand, charged with years of experience and meaning. He looked at it, then at Sarah. "This," Jesse began, holding out the necklace, "was given to me by someone who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. It's a reminder to take care of business, to always put in the work, to believe in yourself, even when no one else does." Sarah stared at the necklace, then at Jesse, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and awe. "But that's your necklace, isn't it? The TCB? From Elvis?" Jesse nodded. "It is, and it's done its job for me. It reminded me to take care of my business, and it's led me here. Now, I think it's time for it to do some good for someone else." He reached out gently, placing the necklace in Sarah's trembling hand. "Just remember what it stands for, Sarah," Jesse said, his voice firm but gentle. "Taking care of business in a flash. Never give up on your music. Never give up on yourself." Sarah's eyes welled up with tears. She clutched the necklace, her fingers closing around the cool gold. I don't know what to say, Mr. Flynn, thank you." Jesse simply smiled, a profound sense of peace settling over him. He had completed the circle. He had been given a gift of belief, and he had now passed it on. He felt the legacy of Elvis, not just as a music legend, but as a spirit of generosity and inspiration flowing through him. He wished Sarah well, offering a few words of encouragement and a promise to look out for her music. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her in the quiet alley just as Elvis had left him. He didn't look back. He knew with the certainty that settled deep in his bones that Sarah would take care of business. Years turned into decades. Jesse Flynn's career continued to flourish, marked by a string of critically acclaimed albums, sold-out world tours, and a reputation as one of the most authentic and enduring artists of his generation. He had carved out his own unique place in music history, a bridge between the soulful traditions of the past and the innovative sounds of the future. He was a Grammy winner, a Hall of Famer, and a mentor to countless young musicians. But he remained Jesse the Kid from the Memphis alley, the man who never forgot where he came from or the impossible kindness that had changed his life. The TCB necklace was no longer with him physically, but its spirit remained his constant companion. He often told the story of its origin in interviews on stage, and to anyone who would listen, he spoke of Elvis not just as a musical icon, but as a profound teacher, a figure who had instilled in him the philosophy of taking care of business. He saw Sarah again years later playing to a packed house at a Nashville club. She had the TCB necklace on gleaming brightly against her denim shirt. She had indeed taken care of business, developing into a powerful singer-joker in her own right. Her music, much like Jesse's, resonated with a raw honesty and an unyielding spirit. They embraced Peck's day to silent understanding passing between them. The legacy had been passed on, and it was thriving. Jesse often reflected on the concept of luck. Was it luck that Elvis had chosen that particular alley on that particular night? Was it luck that he had listened and then given away such a personal, meaningful item? He believed it was more than just chance. It was a cosmic alignment, a moment of profound connection that served as a catalyst. The necklace hadn't magically given him talent or work ethic. It had given him something more powerful: belief. It had been a tangible reminder that someone believed in him. And that belief had ignited his own self-belief, pushing him to work harder, to persist through every setback, to truly take care of business in every sense of the word. He learned that taking care of business wasn't just about professional success. It was about living authentically. It meant taking care of his mental and physical health, his relationships, and his passion for music. It meant using his platform to uplift others, to be generous, and to stay true to the values that had guided him from the start. His music, even decades into his career, still carried echoes of that fateful night. His songs often spoke of hope found in darkness, of the power of unexpected kindness, and of the enduring spirit of rock and roll that had saved his life. He performed Alley Echoes at every concert, and it remained a fan favorite, a poignant anthem that resonated deeply with anyone who had ever faced adversity. In his later years, Jesse lived a comfortable life in a quiet part of Tennessee, still writing, still playing, still teaching. He often visited Graceland, standing outside the gates, remembering the man who had given him so much more than a necklace. He imagined Elvis looking down, maybe nodding with approval. He had honored the gift, not by clinging to it, but by living its meaning. He had carried the torch, kept the music alive, and passed on the message of hope and perseverance to the next generation. The melody of his life, a symphony born in a Memphis alley, resonated through time, a testament to the power of a single act of kindness, a legendary blessing, and the unwavering resolve to always take care of business. The king had given him a start, a symbol, but Jesse had built the legacy, note by note, song by song, a testament to the idea that true legends are not just born, but made through endless dedication and a heart full of soul. And in the quiet hum of his guitar, Jesse knew the spirit of Elvis Presley and the promise of TCB would always linger on.